welcome to another episode of Off-Road Legends, where we look at some of the most iconic and successful off-road vehicles of all time. I'm Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. Today, we're not going to look at just one vehicle, but more a famous rivalry between two race teams, two car makers, and over the years, they're huge fans. I'm talking, of course, about the Subaru STI and the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo. Two rally racing legends that became street racing icons and tuner favorites because they offer some of the best bang for the buck of any cars ever made. This is Subaru STI versus Mitsubishi Lancer Evo. Which is the superior vehicle? We're going to get into their track records, literally, and in terms of street performance, style, and reliability. Comparing the two is a little bit apples to oranges, but at the same time, they have so many similarities, even though the Evo went out of production in 2015. Then again, Subaru just announced that the STI is done, even though there's a whole new WRX generation that just joined the global platform that the STI joined before. It's sort of a mystery as to why Subaru is doing that, unless the rumors that an electric STI is on the way. For most fans, more important than the future of both models is the past 20 plus years of fun they've had debating and driving these two Japanese all-wheel drive icons. So let's jump into it, but in the meantime, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks. The Evo and the STI represented two different visions for the internal combustion engine, even if the STI might be headed towards electrification. Subaru famously uses a horizontally opposed box or four-cylinder engine, usually referred to as a flat four, and of course, a turbocharger. Mitsubishi, on the other hand, invented the balance shaft, so of course they're going to use an inline four engine, and of course, it's going to have a turbocharger on it. In the last few years, the sport compact segment, and hot hatches in particular, have just blown up. You've got the Civic Type R, and the SI. You've got the Volkswagen Golf R, the surprising Ford Focus RS, also canceled, and the Hyundai Veloster N, which recently got a sibling in the Elantra N, and then we found out that the Veloster N also canceled. But maybe all of those competitors explain why Mitsubishi got out of the game in 2015 and why Subaru put an end to the STI this year. But what a game it was while it lasted. The comparisons between the two really have to start with all of their similarities. We're talking about affordable, Japanese, rally-bred, turbocharged, four-cylinder sports cars that are somewhat utilitarian and that you can basically daily drive them, but also offer serious performance potential if you want to, throw on an ECU tune, a bigger turbo, maybe play with the way that your differentials are set up. But they both offer excellent bang for the buck and somewhat aggressive styling. But just like Ryu vs. Ken, Coke vs. Pepsi, Jordan vs. LeBron, there are many ways to measure the successes or the pros and cons of each vehicle. Just like on all of ESPN's sports yelling shows, championships count when it comes to the STI versus the Lancer Evo. And Mitsubishi has an edge in that department. Mitsubishi won 34 world rallies between 1974 and 2002. That's sixth best out of 20 eligible manufacturers in that span. And in Group N production car racing, the Evo won 7 consecutive titles from 95 to 01. Subaru, meanwhile, won 3 manufacturers' titles in WRC, 95, 96, and 97, and 3 drivers' titles in 95, 01, and 03. The STI has won a record 46 victories in rally racing, making it the best out of any eligible vehicle. Unfortunately, Subaru bowed out of WRC competition in 2008 due to financial concerns, and now that news of the STI's demise has hit, it's left us all wondering what's going to happen with this rivalry going forward now that both the Evo and the STI are out of production as street cars. But over the years, the STI definitely offered some distinct advantages for street cars in the production version, mainly because you could get an STI in different generations as either a 2-door coupe, a 4-door sedan, or a 4-door, 5-door hatchback. The Lancer Evo, on the other hand, was always a sedan. But in reality, the STI was always sort of the same size regardless of the number of doors. The first-gen Impreza, which served as the foundation for the first-gen STI that never came to America, actually had the same wheelbase for the 4-door and 2-door variants, much like the E36 M3. So that meant that regardless over the years of whether you wanted a hatchback or 2 doors or 4 doors, you were still going to get that lightweight, nimble chassis with the engine mounted ahead of the front axles and allowing you to really swing things around when you wanted to get aggressive with your driving. And then, if you wanted 4 doors or a 5-door hatch to haul around the family, you were all set. Undoubtedly though, the STI over the years transitioned into much more of an aggressive design. You had big spoilers, side skirts, front splitters, faux air inlets, big rims. It didn't matter what you wanted because Subaru thought everyone wanted the boy racer look. But what if you just wanted that performance in what had traditionally been sort of an understated exterior? Well, luckily the interior kept up with that theme and remained, some might call it, cheap. Back in the day though, that was exactly what everyone wanted. You wanted the simple dash, cloth seats, maybe leather on the shift knob and steering wheel only, that's it. It was all about bang for the buck simplicity in a utilitarian sports sedan. For years, it was just Mitsubishi and Subaru battling it out for who could be sporty but simple and practical. Over all those years though, the Subarus were definitely a little bit more roomy and the suspension was maybe a little bit softer, even though in its later years the STI got so prangy on those big wheels as to make it almost impossible to use as a daily driver if you didn't live in, like, Germany with the smooth Autobahn roads. In West LA, an STI can be absolutely miserable if it's in the last 6 to 8 years. Speaking of those final years, let's directly compare the 2015 Mitsubishi Lancer Evo and the 2015 Subaru WRX STI. Nowadays, they call it just the STI, not the WRX, because they were differentiated when the STI transitioned to Subaru's global platform, which the WRX has now joined on. But all of that aside, it was the WRX STI in 2015. So, the 2015 Lancer Evo had an all-aluminum 2.0-liter turbocharged inline-4, producing 291 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. That's a pretty good torque figure, routed to all 4 wheels through a 5-speed manual and Mitsubishi's super all-wheel control, all-wheel drive system. What an inventive name. The STI's turbocharged flat 4, meanwhile, prioritized horsepower with 305 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. Again, sent to all 4 wheels, but this time through a 6-speed manual transmission and a torque vectoring all-wheel drive system. Even before the pandemic drove the used car market absolutely insane, the Lancer Evo and Subaru STI both held their value quite well. A used Evo right now will probably run you $25,000 to $35,000 unless you go for the GSR edition, which is more like $50,000. That's in comparison to a brand new WRX, which is like just below $30,000 or up to $40,000 depending on what options you want. An STI, on the other hand, will probably cost you, if you want a nice one, in the $30,000s just because people want them so bad and the people that did buy them and kept them stock have basically a gold mine on their hands. Of course, the Evo, now having been out of production for 7 years, has the discontinued rarity effect going on for its values, meaning that you're gonna start seeing prices continue to increase, if I had to guess. Meanwhile, there are also various JDM versions of these cars that make collectors extremely excited. But let's talk about the downright most insane versions of each. Other than the 22B STI, which sold for 400 grand, you've also got the modern S209 version. Only 209 were ever built. They cost $64,000 new. They bumped power up to 341 horsepower, and nowadays they're worth more like $120,000. Again, we're talking about a used Subaru. Meanwhile, the most valuable Mitsubishi Lancer Evo is without a doubt the Evo 6 Tommy Mäkinen edition. Now, chassis number 1 of those recently sold last year at auction for $200,000, But even ones that are not, the collector's versions still command a very serious premium compared to what you would consider a base Lancer Evo. The Tommy Mäkinen edition came in passion red with white NKs and racing decals as an homage to Mäkinen's 4 consecutive drivers' championships with Mitsubishi from 1996 to 1999. He also won an astounding 24 of his 26 all-time WRC victories behind the wheel of a Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. Meanwhile, in Canada, and this really blows my mind, a dealership is selling the last, what could be considered new, Lancer Evo. Keep in mind, we're 7 years later. They're asking $116,000 US for a car with 62 miles on the odometer. Keep in mind that this would have been a $46,000 car new in 2015. Now, of course, we've got inflation running rampant these days, and the collector car market is basically mind-boggling, but still, the equivalent of 116 grand US for a used but new Lancer Evo? No wonder it's sitting on the lot and hasn't quite sold yet. In the end, whether you like the Subaru STI more than the Lancer Evo or vice versa, comes down to a lot of personal preference, but there's a good chance that if you've made a decision already, you're not going to change your mind based on anything you see, hear, or read. You'll just have to get behind the wheel and drive one of these cars. The problem is they're getting harder and harder to find in original unmolested form. Now, we've got the new WRX on the market, which recently joined the previous generation STI, now discontinued, on Subaru's global platform. Don't even get me started. Now, Subaru will make a big deal about how adding the WRX to the global platform will help streamline production and keep prices down while they cram all the rally heritage they can into a commuter chassis. They do that by tightening up the shocks and springs, messing with the electric assist power steering, and adding some grumbly exhaust so you can better hear the now 2.5 liter flat 4. That 2.5 liter matches the STI's 2.5 liter, which was always bigger than the 2.0 liter WRX. But now for the 2.5 liter WRX, they only improved it by 3 horsepower and no more peak torque. Again, they'll say, well, it's got more torque under the curve, but I've driven that car and it's about as uninspiring as you could imagine. I was at 80 in 6th gear and I floored it and basically nothing happened. There's no feedback from the steering wheel. The interior is cheap and utilitarian as you could possibly want. Now, Subaru made some weird engineering and design decisions that seem to suggest they want to try and steal customers from Audi, even though they're doing it with a WRX that they added big, bold fender flares to, and a giant plastic rear diffuser that dominates the tail end and houses the exhaust. Most importantly though, they added adaptive suspension to the WRX, but only in the highest trim level, which is only available with a CVT that Subaru calls the performance transmission. Unfortunately, it's a CVT that fakes shifts to make it feel like an 8-speed automatic. Whether it would be faster around a track just using the CVT like a CVT normally without shifting is a question they would not answer when I asked it. Now, anyone who saw the news about the GT version of the WRX at the top of the price range immediately thought, yeah, you know, they're probably holding off on doing the adjustable suspension so that if you want it with a manual, you have to buy an STI. And then they promptly canceled the STI. Explain that. You can't. But maybe if we make a big enough stink, Subaru will bring back the STI or give the WRX that adjustable suspension. In the meantime, we have to spend our time debating between the Lancer Evo that ended in 2015 and the Subaru STI as it continued through 2022. Over the years, I always thought that the WRX was actually the best bang for the buck, but I can't say that about the new one, unfortunately. The thing is, you're never gonna make enemies debating WRX, STI, or Evo. And if you really want that Evo, maybe you should go for Mitsubishi's other rally superstar, the Pajero Evo, which will be the focus of another of these Off-Road Legends episodes from Hot Cars. We'll just have to wait to see how this rivalry evolves over the coming years To learn more about any of these vehicles, WRX, STI, Lancer Evo, Pajero Evo, or what might be coming next that we don't even know about, go check out hotcars.com. In the meantime, before you sign off, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us beat the algorithm. Thanks.